Your screen will go dark in 20 seconds. Put on your headphones, close your eyes, and immerse yourself in the story. The storm in the mountain began brutally, tearing the sky as if it wanted to devour anyone who dared to cross it. The snow hit their faces like icy needles, and the wind carried a roar that seemed to come from a world in fury. It was in this chaos that two lost lives crossed paths. She staggered, her wine-colored coat completely soaked, hair plastered to her face. Every step was a struggle, until she saw a silhouette appear in the curtain of snow. Tall, steady, but marked by something broken in his eyes. He was also hardly resisting the cold. The heavy dark coat barely held back the wind, and his breath came out uneven, as if his own past were trying to suffocate him more than the mountain. When they got close enough, they could barely hear their own voices. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the cold. "Just lost," she replied, almost out of breath. Thunder crashed too close. Instinctively, she grabbed his arm. He steadied his hand on her back, pulling her against his body to shield her from the impact of the wind. A quick, urgent touch, but so unexpectedly warm that they both froze for a brief second. Another lightning bolt lit up the mountain, revealing a cabin a few meters above. "There. Shelter," he said. They almost fell through the door, which creaked as it was pushed open. The cabin was small, cold, but still a breath of survival. Damp wooden walls, a dead wood-burning stove, a narrow bed, and a thick blanket forgotten in a corner. She struggled to take off her gloves. Her hands trembled so much she could barely open them. He noticed. "Give me your hands." She hesitated for a moment, then extended her frozen fingers. He wrapped them in his own large, warm hands, rubbing slowly to bring life back to her skin. She let out an involuntary sigh. He pretended not to notice, but his pulse quickened. She took off the heavy coat, revealing a light wool sweater completely soaked. A shiver ran through her entire body. "You're going to freeze like that," he said. The fire finally caught in the stove, illuminating the contours of her face. Her big eyes held something he knew well: silenced pain. When she moved closer to the flame, the snowflakes began to melt on her sweater, molding the fabric against her skin. He looked away out of respect, or maybe out of fear of what he felt seeing her that vulnerable. The wind howled outside, throwing snow against the door. "It's going to get even colder," he murmured, picking up the blanket from the corner. She watched him, taking a deep breath, as if waiting for the next word. "This blanket won't be enough for two. Separated. So what's the solution?" she asked, her voice low, almost a gentle challenge. He gripped the blanket tightly as if he needed courage. "We share it." She didn't step back. She just took one step closer. When he sat down beside her, the heat of their bodies met even before the blanket covered them. Their shoulders touched first, then their legs. And soon they were side by side, the blanket wrapped around them both, breathing the same air. Her heart was beating too fast. His too. For a few seconds, still trying to warm up, she rested her head on his shoulder. He tensed up, then relaxed, letting that simple contact completely disarm him. Outside, the storm raged on. But there, under the shared blanket, something much quieter and more dangerous began to be born. The kind of warmth no fire could cause. The storm erased any sign of the world outside. Inside the cabin, there was only the crackle of the fire and the shared breathing under the same blanket. Her head was still resting on his shoulder. He kept his arm close, hesitant, as if he didn't know whether he should hold her or pull away. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was tense, alive, as if something invisible were circling between them, waiting to be broken. Finally, she lifted her face. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured, staring at the fire. He turned his head slowly, watching how the light danced across her skin. His gaze was deep, but restrained, as if he had learned to hide even the way he breathed. "No one should," he replied with raw sincerity. "But sometimes, we don't have a choice." She held her breath. It wasn't about the storm, and they both knew it. The blanket slipped a little, and when she reached to pull it back up, her hand brushed against his. The touch was gentle, but it made them both tense up as if they'd been shocked. Their fingers stayed together 1 second longer than they should have. She slowly withdrew her hand, but his eyes were already on her, warm, watchful, dangerous. She moved a little away from the fire, wrapping her arms around herself as if trying to hold back a memory. He noticed the change in the air. "What are you running from?" he asked without softness, as if he didn't know how to ask any other way. She slowly lifted her face. "From something I don't want to remember. But that always catches up with me." He recognized that. Recognized it too well. "Me too," he said before he could stop himself. The wind slammed hard against the window like a warning. She looked at him. Really looked. And something inside her tightened, as if her sadness had found his and recognized it. "Both of us, then," she murmured. "Lost in the same mountain." He gave a half-sad smile. "Or found," he replied. The air grew warmer, denser, the kind of silence that calls for closeness. When she stood up to get more firewood, the uneven floor surprised her. Her knee buckled slightly. He stood up at the same instant, grabbing her waist before she could fall. His hands wrapped around her firmly, strong, warm. Their eyes met at just a few centimeters apart. Her breath faltered. "Sorry," she whispered, but didn't try to pull away immediately. His thumb brushed lightly along the side of her waist, almost unintentionally. She felt it. He felt that she felt it. "You're cold," he murmured, his voice low, deeper. "It's not just that," she replied without thinking. His heart raced. For a second, neither of them stepped back. He leaned his face forward a few centimeters. She did the same. Their lips almost touched. Almost. But the wind slammed the door hard, making them both jump back with an involuntary fright. The moment shattered, but the desire remained, throbbing between them like something alive. The night went on. The fire began to weaken. The temperature dropped. She looked at the blanket, and then at him. "I think we're going to have to share again," she said, with a discreet smile. He took a slow step, almost too careful, as if he were afraid any sudden movement might break something invisible and delicate between them. They both sat side by side. The blanket came up over their shoulders, and this time he slid his arm behind her, pulling her closer. Not in a possessive way, but like someone who had finally stopped fighting his own instinct. She moved closer until her head rested against his chest. His scent, wood, cold, and something masculine, subtle and warm, wrapped around her. Her hands rested on his chest. He held his breath. "You tremble less when I'm like this," she murmured. "Maybe I just tremble more on the inside," he replied, almost inaudible. She slowly lifted her face. Her lips were just a few centimeters from his neck. "Doesn't this scare you?" she asked. He looked at her mouth. "It scares me, but not enough to make me want to stop." She felt every word on her skin, literally. Her hand traveled up his chest to his shoulder. Her fingers gripped the fabric of his shirt, and his body responded with a visible shiver. She tilted her face up. He lowered his. Their breaths mingled. The blanket wrapped around them as if it were a single body. "Tell me your name," she asked, her voice a warm whisper. He hesitated. "Noah." "Noah," she repeated, as if savoring the sound. "And yours?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Elena." The names hung between them, and then their lips almost touched. Almost. The flame in the stove went out, plunging the cabin into a half-shadow. They fell silent for a few seconds. but so close that just a millimeter would make the kiss happen. And yet, neither of them moved. Not for lack of wanting, but because they were afraid of what it would mean. Afraid of giving up something they had both been trying to protect for a long time. The flame in the stove struggled to stay alive, casting trembling shadows along the cabin walls. The storm was still raging outside, but inside, the heat between Noah and Elena was already more intense than the fire. They remained so close that the air seemed to vibrate. Their lips had almost met minutes before, and even though the kiss hadn't happened, they both felt as if something had been ignited inside them. Something inevitable, dangerous, irresistible. Elena took a deep breath, trying to push away the tremor that wasn't caused by the cold. Her head still rested on his shoulder, and every time Noah inhaled, his chest rose slowly beneath her hand. "I can't sleep like this," she murmured, without moving. "Like this how?" he asked, his voice deep, low. She lifted her face. The silent language between them was far too intense for him not to understand. Their eyes met, and for a second, the storm could have disappeared. There were only the two of them, wrapped in a warmth that made no sense for strangers. "With you this close," she finally replied. "And so, distant at the same time." Noah looked away, as if someone had pulled a painful memory out of him. "I shouldn't get close," he said with difficulty. "I'm not good at this." Elena studied his face for long seconds. The sharp features, the short beard, the tired eyes. There was something there, something broken that he was trying hard to hide. "No one ends up in a storm like this by accident," she whispered. "Not even you." He closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if torn between desire and fear, and for a moment, Elena felt he was about to open up. But Noah took a deep breath and raised an invisible wall again. She moved a little closer, her legs brushing against his under the blanket. That simple touch drew a short breath from his chest. "I don't want to hurt you," Noah said, almost like a warning. "And I don't want to run away again," she replied. The words hung between them like snow frozen in the air. The wind slammed against the door, and the noise made Elena shiver. Noah immediately slid his arm along her back, pulling her against his body in an instinctive, almost protective gesture. There was no hesitation now. His body sought hers as if recognizing a place it should never have left. "It's okay," he murmured near her ear, his mouth lightly brushing her temple. She closed her eyes, feeling his warmth spread across her skin. "You talk like you could hold back the storm," she replied. "I would if I could," Noah said, so sincerely that Elena held her breath. Her hand, which had been resting on his ribs, began to move upward. Slowly. So slowly that he had time to feel each centimeter of her touch. It passed over his chest, over his shoulder, up to his nape. When her fingers slipped into his hair, Noah lost his breath for a moment. "Elena," he murmured, as if saying her name for the first time with all the meaning it carried. She smiled, a small, soft smile, but it completely undid him. "I'm not going to break," she said, bringing her face a bit closer. "You can allow yourself to feel something." Noah swallowed hard, his dark eyes fixed on her mouth. The fire between them grew, dense, inevitable. He lifted his hand and touched her face for the first time. His fingers slid from the line of her jaw to the middle of her neck. Elena shivered under the touch, leaning in even closer. "You're too warm," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "Only because you're too cold," he replied, but the smile he gave didn't reach his eyes. Something inside him hurt. Still, his touch remained. Slow, attentive, irresistible. The wind pushed against the window, making the cabin shake. Elena flinched and Noah wrapped his arms around her tightly, this time without thinking, without holding back. Her body fit against his as if it had been made for that. Elena's head found Noah's chest, and his hands slid along her back, holding her firmly, as if he needed to make sure she wouldn't disappear. She dug her fingers into his shirt, breathing in his warm, masculine, enveloping scent. "You're shaking," Noah said. "And you're too warm for me to think straight," she murmured against his chest. He let out a low laugh that made her whole body vibrate along with him. But the next moment, the laugh died. Elena felt it. "Noah." He hesitated. The embrace was too tight, his muscles too tense. "It's not you," he answered in a low voice. "It's just some memories." She raised her face, searching for his gaze. "Bad memories?" "The worst," he admitted. He seemed to be on the verge of telling her, but something stopped him, as if an invisible hand had tightened around his throat. Elena didn't push. She only slid her thumb across his cheek, a gentle, intimate, delicate gesture. "You don't have to talk," she said, "but you don't have to carry everything alone." He closed his eyes. Her touch softened something inside him that had seemed made of stone. And when he opened his eyes again, there was a new fire there, something he'd been trying to avoid from the very first moment, something that was now consuming him. They were so close that Elena could feel his warm breath brushing her mouth. Noah lifted his hand, touching her chin with extreme delicacy. His eyes dropped to her lips. Elena felt her whole body react, a shiver climbing up her spine. She tilted her face. He did too. Their lips were a breath apart, a single millimeter. The air grew heavy, dense, too warm, too intimate for two strangers. Noah rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I want to," he began, voice hoarse. "But if I kiss you now, I might not be able to stop." Elena ran her fingers along his nape, pulling him closer. "Then don't stop." The words came out low, warm, charged with restrained desire. Noah pressed his hand to her waist, pulling her against his own body, feeling every curve, every tremor, every centimeter of warm skin beneath the fabric. They were lost in each other, but something flickered in his eyes. Fear. A deep, almost desperate fear. He pulled his face away at the last second. "I can't," he said, with a pain Elena wasn't expecting. She froze, not from the cold, but from the impact. "Why?" she asked, her voice breaking. He looked away as if looking at her were too dangerous. "Because everything I touch, I ruin." Elena felt her heart tighten, and without saying anything, she touched his face with both hands and forced him to look at her. "You don't seem capable of destroying anything," she whispered. "You're just afraid of loving someone again." The silence stretched between them, dense, deep, loaded with a feeling neither of them dared to name. Noah closed his eyes and rested his forehead against hers again. It was the most intense, almost kiss of both their lives, and the storm kept roaring outside as if it knew exactly what was about to happen. The fire was still crackling, but the cold in the cabin was becoming impossible to ignore. Even under the blanket, sitting side by side, the wind felt like it was cutting through them. Elena tried to snuggle closer, pulling the blanket up to her neck, but her muscles trembled uncontrollably. Noah noticed immediately. "You're freezing," he said, his voice low. "Sitting like this won't work." She lifted her eyes to him, her lashes heavy with tiredness and cold. "And what do you suggest?" she murmured, her chin trembling. Noah hesitated for just a second. Then he took a deep breath and said, "We need to lie down. The body warms up better that way. Together." Elena didn't refuse. There was no reason to, and deep down, something inside her wanted exactly that. Noah extended his hand. She touched his. The gesture was small, but charged with something that burned slowly. He led her to the thickest rug on the floor near the fire, where the temperature was less cruel. The two of them lay down side by side, facing each other, and Noah pulled the large blanket over both of them, tucking the edges in so the cold air wouldn't get through. Their legs touched first, then their hands, and finally, their whole bodies. Elena let out a soft sigh when she felt his warmth wrap around her. "Better?" Noah asked, his voice husky from the closeness. "Much," she replied, her breath mingling with his in the warm air beneath the blanket. Lying down, the distance between them practically didn't exist. His face was so close she could see every detail, the outline of his short beard, the shadow of his lashes, the way his eyes always seemed to carry a storm of their own. Noah's hand rested on her arm over the blanket, but Elena, without thinking, slipped her hand under the cover and touched his bare forearm directly. His skin was warm, strong, alive. Noah held his breath. "Elena," he whispered, "you have no idea what that does to me." She gave a slight smile. "Then show me." Noah closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to hold something back inside himself, and failed. He moved his face closer and rested his forehead against hers. Their breathing grew uneven, shared, intimate. His hand slid slowly along her waist under the blanket, just enough for her to feel the firm pressure of his fingers. She responded by moving her body a bit closer, until their warmth became one. The wind blew harder against the wall. Elena instinctively curled up, and Noah pulled her into his chest in a firm embrace. Now they lay together, her body fitted against his, her head resting in the curve between his shoulder and chest. His hand found the small of her back beneath the blanket, offering real, physical, protective warmth. Noah's heart was racing. Elena felt it clearly, every second. She slowly lifted her face, looking at him in the dim light. "You tremble more when I'm this close to you," she remarked with a soft, teasing smile. "I tremble because you're close," Noah replied, not even trying to hide it. His embrace tightened, strong, warm, intimate. His fingers moved slowly up her back, as if memorizing her skin through the fabric. Elena sighed, the soft sound vibrating against his chest. Noah lost his breath for a moment. Elena lifted her face, placing one hand on his chest, feeling the heat spread into her fingers. Noah ran his hand down her arm, until he held her hand firmly under the blanket. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into, Elena," he murmured, fighting something invisible. She moved even closer, so near her mouth almost touched his. "I know exactly," she replied, "and I'm not afraid." Noah opened his eyes slowly, as if everything inside him were yielding. His gaze traveled across her face, then slowly down to her mouth. Elena's hand slid up his chest to his neck. Her fingers slipped into his nape, and Noah let out a low, hoarse breath. "Elena, don't do this to me," he said, almost pleading. "Then kiss me," she whispered. His breath shook. Noah brought his face closer slowly, as if afraid of startling her. But when his lips finally touched hers, it was as if all the restraint of the past days shattered at once. The kiss was not gentle. It was hot, deep, urgent. His fingers tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. Elena answered with the same intensity, running her hand along his nape and pressing her body against his under the blanket. Her leg moved involuntarily, brushing against his. Noah let out a low moan against her mouth, a sound that made Elena burn inside. The kiss lasted long seconds. When Noah finally drew back a little, their breathing was uneven. "I should stop," Noah murmured, his face still pressed to hers. "Then why don't you?" Elena teased, touching his chin. He closed his eyes. The pain in his gaze was real. "Because I want you, so much more than I should." She rested her forehead against his, their lips still brushing. "I want you too," she whispered. "And I'm not running." Noah's chest rose in a deep sigh. His hand caressed her face, sliding to her jaw, then to her neck in a slow, warm touch. Still lying together under the same blanket, Elena watched him in silence. Noah seemed to be fighting against something he wanted to confess but didn't know how. "I lost her," he said suddenly, his voice low. "The woman I loved, and I couldn't save her." Elena touched his face with both hands. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I don't want to fail again, Noah said, his voice breaking. You're not failing with me, Elena replied, firm. You're being human. Noah closed his eyes, taking a deep breath as if he were breaking inside and putting himself back together at the same time. He pulled Elena closer, holding her tightly, and she nestled her face against his chest, clutching his shirt with her fingers. There, lying down, so close it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began, the warmth between them finally defeated the cold of the storm, and nothing but the sound of shared breathing filled the cabin. The cold arrived before the sun. A cold draft crossed the cabin, making the blanket tremble slightly. Elena opened her eyes slowly, feeling first the warmth, then the gentle weight, and finally, the reality. She was lying inside Noah's embrace, literally inside it, his arm wrapped around her waist beneath the blanket, holding her against his body as if it were already instinctive. His leg was intertwined with hers in a natural way, as if they had slept like that for much longer than a single night. Her face rested in the soft space between his shoulder and chest. Each deep breath Noah took made her body move with his, a rhythm that felt safe, familiar, almost too right. She stayed like that for a few seconds, just feeling the warmth, his scent, wood, wind, and something masculine and warm. Her arm draped over his torso, fitting as if it belonged there. Noah took a deep breath and Elena realized he was waking up. Don't move, he murmured, his voice still rough with sleep. I'm still dreaming. Elena smiled against his chest. Are you? If you stay here, I think I am, he replied, opening his eyes. She slowly lifted her face and Noah looked at her in that soft morning light. There was something different about him now. Less defensive, less cold, almost vulnerable. I slept like this. With you, Elena murmured, as if noticing it for the first time. You did, he said, lightly brushing her hair with his fingers. And so did I. His touch was slow, gentle, almost reverent. His fingers slid along the side of her face down to her jaw in a gesture far too tender for a man who carried so much pain. Elena felt her body respond, not just with desire, but with a deep emotional warmth. Noah leaned in and pressed his lips to her forehead. It was a slow, warm, soft kiss, but it made Elena hold her breath as if she'd been hit in the center of her soul. Good morning, he murmured, his mouth still brushing the skin of her forehead. Good morning, she replied, her voice low, husky. She slid her hand across the muscles of his chest, feeling the heat beneath the thin fabric of his shirt. Noah reacted with a slow, deep sigh. Elena, he said, his voice now deeper. She lifted her eyes and met his, so close that just a small movement would turn into a kiss. You don't have to run today, she whispered. Noah traced his fingers along her chin, sliding down until he touched her lower lip. Elena shivered, her eyes half closing. If I don't run, he began, his fingers brushing the corner of her mouth, I'm going to kiss you again. Then kiss me, she answered, without hesitation. Noah smiled that small, almost sad but deeply warm smile, and then leaned in. The kiss came slower than the night before, but much deeper. A morning kiss, full of meaning, full of everything they hadn't said. Elena slid her hand to the back of his neck, pulling him closer. Noah responded by tightening his grip on her waist, making her body fit even more closely against his. The kiss intensified, slow, steady, enveloping, until something in the rafters of the cabin cracked. A sharp sound, then another, and another. They broke the kiss at the same time. Noah lifted his body a little, still keeping Elena protected under the blanket. The wind was stronger now, much stronger. The storm hadn't passed. On the contrary, it seemed worse. Another crack. More violent. This isn't good, Noah said, his eyes scanning the ceiling. Elena slowly sat up, pulling the blanket up around her shoulders. Is it Breaking? The wood is old, Noah replied, and with all the weight of the snow, another crack, this time followed by a long, deep creak as if the roof were struggling to breathe. Elena instinctively recoiled, and Noah pulled her body back against his. Hey, easy. I'm here, he said, running his hand along the back of her neck in a protective gesture. She took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of his hand calm her. But it wasn't just fear of the cabin. It was the fear that grew inside her every time something threatened to take him away. Noah noticed. What is it? He asked, looking into her eyes. Elena hesitated. Her hands clutched the blanket. I don't like losing people, she whispered. He leaned closer, brushing his hand over her face. Me neither, he replied. But I'm not letting you go. His voice had a weight that was almost a vow. The roof creaked again, but less this time, maybe just a warning, not an immediate threat. Elena took a deep breath and lay back down, this time resting her head directly on Noah's chest, seeking his warmth without any shame. He automatically wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her closer. Elena, what happened to you? He asked, his voice soft without pressure. She dug her fingers into the fabric of his shirt, as if she needed to hold on to something to find the words. I lost someone too, she finally said. I lost everything, actually. Noah waited. He didn't rush her, didn't demand. He was just there. My husband, she began, but her voice broke. It wasn't an accident. He took his own life. Noah closed his eyes for a second. The impact hit him like a punch to the chest. Elena went on, her voice trembling, and I was left trapped with questions, with guilt, with sleepless nights trying to understand why. Sometimes I feel guilty for being alive, other times for wanting to move on. Noah brought his hand to her face, gently guiding it so she would look at him. You're not to blame for anything, he said, firm. Nothing. Elena's eyes filled with silent tears, and Noah brushed his thumb across her face, wiping them away slowly. You deserve to live, he continued. You deserve to start over, and to feel again. Elena took a deep breath, as if trying to absorb every word. Sometimes I think feeling something for you is wrong, she admitted. Noah pulled her body closer to his and hugged her tightly, for real. It's not wrong, he murmured against her hair. It's human. She closed her eyes, breathing in his warmth. The two of them stayed there, lying down, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the silence say the rest. The confession didn't push them apart. It brought them even closer. Noah held her face and kissed her again. This time it wasn't driven by pure desire. It was born of shared pain, tenderness, empathy, and wanting. The kiss was deep, slow, loaded with meaning. Elena's hands held his face, pulling him closer, as if she were afraid of losing him at any moment. He responded by sliding his hand along the small of her back, drawing her body in until it was pressed against his under the blanket. The touch, the kiss, the warmth. It was all too intense, but neither of them pulled away. When they finally parted, Elena was breathless. You're still trembling, she said. Because you mean more than I should allow, Noah replied. She smiled, a fragile smile but real. Not to me. Noah rested his forehead against hers. Then let's not run, he said, softly, firmly. The roof creaked again, reminding them that the world outside was still dangerous. But for a few minutes there inside, in the warmth of two intertwined bodies, nothing else existed but them. Morning moved on, but the light barely came through. The sky was so heavy it looked like the day had never really begun. Noah and Elena were still lying down, wrapped in each other, their bodies entwined under the blanket, as if the world outside couldn't reach them there. Noah slowly stroked her back with his thumb, an almost involuntary gesture as natural as breathing. Elena kept her hand spread over his chest, feeling each strong, slow beat, as if his heart were trying to say what he still didn't have the courage to. Then a sharp crack echoed in the ceiling. This time it wasn't small. It wasn't a warning. It was a threat. Elena lifted her head immediately, her eyes wide. Noah. He was already looking up. He loosened his embrace, not to move her away, but to position his body between her and any piece of wood that might fall. Another crack, then a creak that sounded like a deep groan from the structure. "The cabin is giving in," Noah said, now sitting up and pulling Elena with him. She grabbed his arm, fear burning hotter than the cold. "Is it going to collapse?" "If we stay here?" "Yes." She took a deep breath, swallowed hard. The blanket slipped partly from her shoulders, revealing her thin, wrinkled shirt, a consequence of the night they'd spent together. Noah noticed her body trembling and quickly pulled the blanket back up over her shoulders. The firmness of his touch conveyed something words could not. "You're not alone. I will protect you." The storm howled outside. Opening the door meant facing ice, biting wind and snow hitting hard, but staying wasn't an option. "Can you stand?" Noah asked, holding her face so she would look into his eyes. "If you're close, yes," Elena replied, with raw honesty. He gently squeezed her chin, a tender gesture that made her heart race. "I won't let you go." The sentence was still echoing when the ceiling cracked further. Bits of wood fell to the floor. There was no time to lose. Noah slung his backpack over his shoulder and pulled Elena toward him. They stood up but stayed extremely close, their bodies almost pressed together out of necessity and growing fear. When Noah opened the door, the wind slammed in violently, whipping snow across their faces. Elena flinched by reflex and Noah slid his arm around her waist, shielding her as they stepped outside. The brutality of the weather swallowed them at once. The cold was a blow. The wind cut like a blade. The snow fell heavy, almost horizontal. Noah drew Elena tighter against his chest. "Stay with me. Stay close to me." "I'm not letting go," she answered, firm. They had gone only a few meters when a huge cracking sound split across the mountain. They both turned. The cabin collapsed in a single motion, the roof caving in as if it were made of wet paper. Elena raised a hand to her mouth, shocked. "Noah, if we had waited one more minute," he finished, pulling her against his chest. She hugged Noah tightly, burying her face in his neck, as if that were the only solid thing in that white, raging world. He wrapped her body with both arms, holding her completely, tight, warm, protective. The embrace was more than physical. It was emotional. It was need. Noah looked around. Visibility was low, but he understood the mountain's logic. "There's a cave a bit higher up," he said. "It's not far. But with this snow, it's going to be hard." Elena took a deep breath, trapping the fear in her lungs. "I trust you," she said. Noah looked at her for a second. Those words stirred something in him in a way nothing had in a long time. "Then come. Stay close." He took her hand and tucked it inside his coat against his chest to warm it. She gasped at the sudden heat. "This way you won't lose feeling," he explained, his warm breath brushing her hair. Elena kept her hand there, but also moved closer, feeling Noah's warmth through the layers of clothing. Their steps were slow, difficult. The snow reached halfway up their calves. The wind almost pushed them backward. But Noah never let go of her hand. Not for a second. When they reached a rocky area, the wind got even stronger. The snow blew so thick it almost blinded them. Noah put his body in front of Elena, blocking the wind. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "I don't want you to suffer everything alone," she protested. He turned his face to her, his gaze warm even under the storm. "I can take it. You've already suffered too much." The sentence tore something open inside her. She placed her hand on his chest, over the snow-soaked fabric. "I'm not something fragile, Noah." "I know. he replied. But you are the most precious thing I've touched since I lost everything. Elena felt her breath catch. He noticed. The wind hit harder, and Noah instinctively pulled her against him, wrapping both arms around her so the wind wouldn't knock her down. And it was at that moment that the snow gave way beneath her feet. Elena slipped. Her body dropped a few inches downward, toward a dangerous slope. "Elena!" Noah shouted, his voice breaking with fear. He grabbed her forearm with force, pulling with everything he had. The snow gave a little more. Her foot lost its grip, but Noah held on as if his life depended on it. Elena's eyes were wide with terror. "Noah, I'm here," he shouted, pulling harder. "I'm not going to let you fall." The wind roared. Their hearts pounded so loud it was all they could hear. With a strong pull, Noah managed to bring her back onto solid ground, and as soon as she was steady on her feet, he yanked her into his arms. A desperate, almost painful, deep hug. Elena clung to his coat, burying her face in the collar, shaking all over. "I thought I was going to fall," she murmured against him. "I would never let that happen," Noah replied, his voice trembling, his chin resting on the top of her head. He held Elena so tightly it felt like he was trying to fuse her into his own body. And for the first time she felt Noah shudder not from the cold but from fear. He had almost lost her, and it destroyed him. "Elena," he whispered, almost pleading. "Don't scare me like that. Please." She lifted her face, looking into his eyes. The snow hit both their faces, but they didn't feel it. "Noah." She raised her hand and touched his face, her thumb brushing a snowflake from his beard. "I'm here." He took her face in his hands and kissed her. It was an urgent kiss, a kiss full of fear, relief, desire, and need. A hot kiss in the middle of the mountain's deadly cold. Elena grabbed his coat with both hands, answering the kiss with the same intensity, as if every second were too precious to waste. When they parted, their breath escaped in small, warm clouds in the frozen air. "The cave is just up ahead," Noah said, catching his breath. "Take me there," Elena replied without letting go of his hand. They kept climbing, more united than ever, and when they finally saw the dark opening of the cave between the rocks, they both felt the weight of the world ease a little. But the storm wasn't over, and the mountain still had much to reveal. He looked away, his fingers tightening on her waist. "I lost my wife," he said, swallowing hard. But it wasn't just that. Elena waited. She didn't push. "I was with her," Noah went on. "There was ice on the trail, and I slipped. I couldn't hold on to her." Elena felt her stomach clench. Noah was reliving every detail through his voice. "I loved her," he said, his voice breaking. "And since that day, I can't touch anyone without thinking I'll destroy them." Elena placed her hands on his face, forcing him to look at her. "Noah, you didn't let her go. You tried. You fought. But she fell," he replied, his voice cracking. She kissed the corner of his mouth. Soft. Tender. "You're not responsible for the tragedy. I feel responsible. Then let me remind you as many times as it takes that you're not alone," Elena murmured. He tilted his face, his lips almost brushing hers. "Elena, I'm afraid of feeling for you everything I felt for her." She smiled, sad and sweet. "I'm afraid too, but I still want you." Noah closed his eyes, and when he opened them, there was no resistance left. He took her face in both hands and kissed her.